You had to write letters then. There was no email. They actually sat down and
Stone Ages of the 90s.
They licked a stamp. You understand me? You know, we hate you.
That's a special kind of animosity to go through that much effort.
The Panther purists.
Hey, you are red hot right now. Your run on Deathstroke has really revitalized that character and I think introduced it to a whole new audience. And you've got this insanely cool arc coming up, Deathstroke versus Batman. Tell me about the story that you're going to tell in this arc.
Okay, so with Deathstroke versus Batman, we're talking about the ultimate custody battle. And the loser gets stuck with Damian, the current Robin, to Batman. Some evidence is unearthed that has been hidden in a bank vault for a long time that proves through a DNA match that Slade Wilson, who is Deathstroke, is the biological father of Damian Wayne, who is the current Robin. Now, is that so? Batman confronts Deathstroke, and Deathstroke immediately goes, "Well, those results are faked. It's obviously faked," and he doesn't believe it, doesn't buy it. He's not interested in Robin. You like Robin? Keep him. You know, I could care
He wants
less.
nothing to do with Damon.
He doesn't. He despises Damian. Damian's a little brat. Damian and Deathstroke have fought several times by now, one-on-one, and Damian has just, he's gotten the best of Deathstroke on several occasions.
He's driven him. Damian has literally driven him insane.
He's driven him. Yeah. In issue 5 of Deathstroke, Deathstroke kidnaps Robin, only to find that Robin is driving him crazy, and Deathstroke can't wait to give him back. He's just a handful. However, the mystery is, where did these results come from? Who created them? Who planted them in this bank vault? And and Batman is not going to be satisfied until he has the answers to these things, which brings him into conflict with Deathstroke. And we kind of examine these two different sides of a similar coin, of these two very thoughtful, very methodic, anal retentive, excessively methodic people, although one is working for justice and one is working for himself, essentially.
Yeah, that's a great point you make. You're right. They are mirror images.
Right.
In a lot of ways. And Deathstroke's such an interesting antagonist for Batman because he's not intimidated by him in the least, and he knows exactly where his limits are and how far he'll go.
Right. Yeah, it's but the reverse is also true. As we will see, there will come a flip side to that where Batman calls Deathstroke's bluff. You're not going to do that because that's not who you are. So there are these just these different flips that are going to happen here, and looking at not just their profession, but also looking at them as fathers. And the book has essentially, it's all about fathers and sons. And you have Alfred, the butler, and Wintergreen, who is Deathstroke's aide-de-camp. They're like the grandpas. And they are, in a B story, they are conspiring against Batman and Deathstroke because they feel that both Batman and Deathstroke, in their own way, have taken this thing too far. And they're worried about them, and they say they need to save them from themselves. So you have the two grandpas, and you have the two father figures, Batman and Deathstroke. And then you have these confessionals, these interstitial confessionals throughout. One's being done by Robin, one is being done by Jericho, who is Deathstroke's natural son. So that theme just carries all through. What is the meaning of family? What is the meaning of fatherhood? Why fathers are important to sons? Questions about legacy, those types of things. And then the ultimate question of who is Robin's father. And as we tape this interview, I can tell you honestly, hand to God, I don't know, because DC hasn't told me. And that's up to the bosses at DC. And there's some back and forth between the creative people who have an investment in creative stuff and the publishing group who are doing the business side of it.
Right.
So at some point, a decision will be made, and they'll tell me what the end of my story is. I don't get to make that decision.
How tricky is it to walk this high wire of writing this showdown? Because how do you approach that to make sure that You're true to each character, but you don't really leave one of them weaker than the other.
I could probably write 2 issues of solo Deathstroke in the time it takes me to write 1 issue of this. And then there are many revisions. There are 4, 5, 6 drafts. My editor, Alex Antone, he is being a very strong advocate for both sides, for both Batman and Deathstroke, and playing devil's advocate and really challenging me on just motives and how we go about this. He's holding up a very high standard, and I appreciate him doing that. But this is a high bar, you know. And at every turn, I'm like, okay. So people were asking me today who had read the first issue, and it reads like an issue of Batman, like Deathstroke's being a guest star in his own book. Well, in part 2, it's mostly about Deathstroke, you know. So it'll bounce back and forth a little bit in terms of screen time, how much screen time they have. But it's absolutely important that while they switch places about who is the antagonist and who is being defensive, that no one character, you know, gets over on the other character so consistently that, you know, it looks like I'm showing favoritism between the 2 of them. It's a very difficult task because neither one of them are stupid and neither one of them can look stupid.
You have this great ability to distill these stories about these great, powerful, outlandish characters to something very primal. And you're even doing it in Justice League, in the Justice Lost storyline. In issue 42, Wonder Woman shot, badly wounded. There's political elements there. How do you approach bringing these characters to a more human level? Does that come easy to you to come up with these ideas and situations for them?
Well, I think I approach everything from that way, and it's probably a result of me just getting older. 20 years ago, Denny O'Neil told me, I asked him about, well, why are you writing characters like Batman? And the question, why don't you want to write Spider-Man or Galactus or something? And he said something to the effect of, Jim, I just don't believe that anymore. It's hard to get into that mindset. It's not impossible for me to get into the mindset, but I'm much more intrigued by, I feel like the more reality we ground this stuff in, the more the fantastic elements will pop against the reality. So let's ground it in as much truth as possible. If there was a group of individuals with the powers of gods living on some satellite, in unclaimed airspace, that has weapons and transporters and that kind of stuff, there, in our society, the way it works here with the social media and with the highly politicized nature of our nation here, there would be hearing after hearing after hearing and investigation after investigation. The Twitterverse would be going nuts day and night. With the 24 news cycle, who are these people? Who licensed them to be up there? And who's regulate? Who watches the watchers? And then in any kind of group, that could be Cub Scouts. Any kind of group, it becomes a political organization. If you work in an office with 50 other people, then it's an environment that has personalities and so forth. And these personalities will sometimes come into conflict, even though you're working toward the same goal of whatever your company does or whatever your organization does. So I wanted to kind of look at the Justice League like a workplace drama, and kind of go, okay, let's examine, what these conflicts might be, how they play out, and then the flip side is why these people need each other and why the world needs a Justice League. And the last part of that is what I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure I was telling stories that could only happen when this specific group of people assemble themselves. These are not stories that could happen to them individually. Like you brought up the Wonder Woman shooting. First of all, she's not really shot. Someone fires off an automatic rifle at close range at Superman, and she is struck by a ricochet that severs her carotid, and she's getting ready to bleed out like that. And as we know, Wonder Woman can block bullets with her bracelets, but she has to be paying attention to block bullets with her bracelets. If bullets could not hurt her, she would have no reason to block them. But this is the kind of thing where I just go, well, let's play this stuff out in a most as realistic a fashion as possible, and see where that goes. Because everybody else was doing the big cosmic story, and I felt like, well, what could I contribute that is not just another shade of that particular color, and do something completely different.
You know, switching gears and companies, a character that you're indelibly linked with has had a really good year in 2018.
Really?
Yeah. Some guy, T'Challa, something. But in all seriousness, like, your run on Black Panther is the definitive run on the book for a lot of people. And it really, especially for the modern version of Panther, what's it been like seeing that character rise to the prominence that he has with the crazy success of the film?
Well, back when the film was in development, I got a call from the executive producer. I got several calls. We had several discussions about the character. And I was talking to Nate Moore, one of the executives, and I said, I expressed some concern. I said, look, Nate, I really have a concern here. And he said, what? I don't know if anybody's going to come see this movie. I mean, it's a movie about a black character. He's not a super powered individual. He's over this African nation. How are you going to get a white audience to come see this movie? You know, and Nate laughed and said, they're going to come see the movie. You know, and this is 2 years ago. I'm impressed. I do want to say, you know, just as often as I possibly can, that 75 to 85% of what you see up on the screen was created by Don McGregor. Okay, Stan Lee and Jack, they absolutely created this character.
But yes, Don McGregor really expanded it.
Don built all that infrastructure, and a lot of these characters were built by Don. When I came along, I painted the house. Okay, so I said, all right, this is a great house. This is a great old house, but we need to update it for this audience here. And then I added my own few characters or whatever it is, and sort of put it into that.
You did more than paint. You added some storm impact windows. You improved the landscape. You did more than just paint the house.
Yeah, I made it a two-car garage.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, you added some nice upholstery to the couch. You did a lot more than that.
A lot of people contributed to it. But it was just, I have to tell you, I was tickled to death to see, you know, so we got M'Baku, we called him Man Ape in the comic books, you know, and they made Man Ape work, and not just made him work, but he kind of steals the movie in the third act, and he's like he's the tribal leader of the Jabari tribe, and Jabari Taylor is a good friend of mine, and I named the Jabari, I need a name for this tribe, Jabari. You know, so he's got to be tickled wherever Jabari is right now that his name is in the film. And then Nakia is named after my niece Nakia, and Okoye is actually a boy's name. I hope that the producers know that it's an African boy's name that I use because I'd written a song which takes us off on a tangent into my music. But yeah, it just it feels great, you know, to see your work come to life. And then of course, you know, Reginald Hudlin took it to his level, and Ta-Nehisi Coates came along and really put a whole new spin on it. And the movie visually looks more like Ta-Nehisi Panther than my Panther. Shuri obviously is a creation of Reggie's. So we all have, you know, skin in the game, and we were all there at the premiere, and it was just a really wonderful experience.
Isn't it amazing how it's like a blueprint for how you grow and expand the character and make them timeless? With Stan and Jack creating it, Don McGregor and Billy Graham, who did some amazing artwork in the 70s.
Yeah.
And then you come along, and then Reginald Hudlin, and then Ta-Nehisi with Brian Stelfreeze.
Yeah.
It's really incredible. That's literally how you turn a character from a cool creation into a iconic, timeless character.
Well, actually, you know, when I came along with Joe and Jimmy Palmiotti, Joe Quesada and Jimmy Palmiotti, I went back to Stan. Okay, I read Don. I love Don. I went back to Stan, and I said, okay, if we're going to do this, let me get to the core of the character. What did Stan really have in mind for this character? And he wrote this character virtually colorblind. There was no reference whatsoever to his skin color ever in Stan's work. Go back and reread it. There's never a reference to like, oh, he's black. It was like completely irrelevant, you know. And then in Stan's interpretation of the character, which is the definitive interpretation, he was a gadget head. He had all these gadgets. You know, he had this highly technical kingdom. He beat the Fantastic Four single-handedly. He was a tough guy. You know, and I said, well, Panther should be a tough guy with gadgets. And you may not remember this, and some people who are coming on to the Panther now, discovering the Panther now, they might be surprised to know that when Marvel Knights Panther debuted, we received a lot of criticism and hate mail over the fact that we gave Panther the equivalent of an iPhone in the Kamoyo card, and that he had adamantium claws, and he had a bulletproof costume, and we got, and you had to write letters then. There was no email. They actually sat down and
Stone Ages of the 90s.
They licked a stamp. You understand me? You know, we hate you.
That's
you
a
know,
special kind of animosity to go through that much effort.
the Panther purists. No, he must be just powerless, and he's just wearing a leotard. And I said, well, that makes no sense, because Stan said this, and Stan is the Bible. And I went back to that and integrated that into what we're doing. And now when I tell people that story, they don't believe me. They go, really? Well, no, it's true.
Christopher, continued success.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the time.
Not a problem.